So this is how the story in this novel went. One day the world faced calamity. Towers and dungeons appeared out of nowhere. Monsters attacked humans, turning the world upside down, especially Korea. It became a famous region where dungeons and monsters appeared non-stop. The attacks were deadlier and more destructive than in any other country. It was a living hell, but not all hope was lost. The hope in this novel is called the heroes. Korea battled monsters through the powers of the heroes, and they were able to put the dungeons under control. By using the industry built around this calamity, they managed to recover from the crisis. Time passed, and Korea became a leading global power alongside America. It became a place where heroes from all over the world gathered. As a countermeasure for the towers and dungeons, Korea founded a hero institution using state-of-the-art magic and magic engineering, presenting the cube, where the strongest heroes from all over the world are gathered. It is where the hero that will save this world is, and his rival. You may ask how he knows all of this. The one who created this world is not God, but him, the author, Kim Ha-jin. But there is one problem. We see a stadium full of a loud crowd. A hero is being presented as the #1 among the first-year hero cadets, Kim Soo-ho. The world that the author wrote is unfolding in front of his eyes as he looks at the main character, the cube, the cadets, and Kim Soo-ho. It all seems familiar to the author, but what is going on? He can hear all the compliments Soo-ho is receiving from the crowd from so far away. He heard a woman's voice saying, "The students accepted this year are all great, but Kim Soo-ho is exceptional for a 17-year-old. He remembered that Kim Soo-ho is this world's main character, the person that will lead this chaotic world dominated by monsters. He has the traits of an upright hero that brings good and justice, and he has a special secret that he is hiding from everyone. The one to go up against him is the second place, Shin Jong-hak. He has the potential to rival the main character, but he is a future villain and believer of elitism. They might be on the same side right now, but later in the story, Jong-hak becomes the villain due to his inferiority complex against Soo-ho. They will face each other like light and darkness. The author was looking at both characters standing next to each other. He must be in the world he wrote years ago, but then asked the question, who is he? He must have a name if he was one of the characters that he wrote. Someone tapped on his shoulder. He asked him why he was spacing out and called him by the name of Kim Chun-dong. He was stunned and asked if he was talking to him. The guy called him Kim Chun-dong again. The author does not remember writing a character by that name. Who was Chun-dong supposed to be? He looked at the stadium screen and the camera pointed at him. To his surprise, he had no face, but only a question mark instead of a normal expression. That is when he realized he became a character that he never actually wrote. He does not have an appearance and his name is old-fashioned, and he will rarely encounter the main character. He is completely normal, but he is in the Cube Cadet. He is basically an audience filler character. The author became an extra in his own novel, even lesser than that. One day an email was sent to someone. He looked at it with surprise. It was an email offering a remake of his own novel, The Returnee Hero, the web novel that he wrote and stopped over a year ago because of his laziness. He didn't believe that. They wanted to remake a novel that had stopped being released. He found it weird but sent an email back to them. He didn't know that the reply he sent, thinking it was just a fan request, would be the cause of everything that is happening right now. Some weeks later, he got used to his face with the question mark on it. He was certain it was not a dream, and that this was the world in the novel he wrote. The Kim Chun-dong he got reincarnated as is one of the countless extras in the novel. He tried all different methods but wasn't able to find out how he was brought here, who dropped him into this place, or why. He might have to stay in this world for a long time. If the story continues even after the point where the novel stops, he will stay for 10 years. The author was frustrated by that idea. He didn't want to stay here for 10 years hanging out with teenagers. He had a life, and he didn't want to barely survive in a novel that had stopped releasing. The author couldn't think of any escape method other than catching up to the main story. There was no other way than to try and live the whole story out, and to do that, he should go to school. The Cube is an artificial island that inhabits around 50,000 people, all with magic capabilities. The existence of the Cube is one of the reasons Korea is called a powerful nation. It is the core of that city and the main stage of the novel, the hero training school. Even among the hero candidates who have special abilities and talents, only a small number of elites can become cadets of the Cube. The original owner of his body is also a Cube cadet, But the author doesn't know what ability he has. It must be good since he was chosen. He just hopes that it is a talent he can use to survive this school. He entered the class that was full of people. It was the truth class and the center of the cube's arc. The villains and rivals were on one side, and the antagonists and sidekicks on the other, the same place the protagonist is in. Each character would soon form cliques, and they would face countless complications because of that. The author didn't know what to do to live 10 years with these people, but he would manage. He finished class and was so tired and bored. When he came back to his apartment, he found a mysterious package. He thought it was Chundong's personal belongings. When he opened it, he found his notebook from real life. He opened the laptop, and it flashed at him. He dropped it. It seemed like it was downloading data, synchronizing his data with Chundong's. His stats were lower than average. When he took a look, he realized it was the setup book he wrote. When the synchronization completed, the barrier that censored, the author's face broke off. Due to a problem in the system, he turned into another character called Kim Ha-jin and got his expressions and appearance. Turns out the new character had his own face. He noticed there were holograms all around him. He thought it could be an enlightenment. Enlightenment is a phenomenon that happens when one surpasses his limits, and through it they can see their talents, skills, and abilities as stats and values, and become stronger in more efficient ways than before. He looked at his stats, and they were far below where Kim Chundong's were, but he got SP points in return. His talent was observation and browsing. He could observe anyone in his line of sight, and he could browse his laptop anytime, anywhere, without needing the actual laptop in hand. He thought this synchronization thing was why the question mark had disappeared. He also had one additional talent, settings intervention. He could use the SP points to write or edit any non-living target. He could write or edit his own stats, talents, or masteries. SP points, also called story points, are gained through his importance to the story. He could also convert his points into 1,000 story points. He didn't remember writing an ability like that. He thought to himself that the reason he was given this laptop and ability was to intervene with the main story. Another stat card appeared, saying it would be unlocked after the main story ends. He realized that to find a hint to come back to his world, he needed to shut up and indulge in the main story. He got energized and thought that there was no guarantee he would even come back to his original world, even if he just waited until he reached the part where the story stopped publishing. Even if the information that would be unlocked wasn't a hint, he might stumble upon a clue about escaping this world if he got involved with the main characters. And to do that, he needed to become stronger. A stat card appeared, asking if he wanted to invest his points in stats, and he clicked yes. There was no concept of leveling up in his novel before. They couldn't just raise their stats the way they wanted. So the only method he had was with points. If he wanted to make the most of it, he needed to invest in the luck stat. Luck wasn't limited to the chance of finding rewards in dungeons or getting a money bonus. It was a cheat code for everything in life. But of course, a stat like that wasn't made to be raised with normal points. But he remembered he could convert his points to story points. He converted his points and invested 9,000 points in luck. As soon as he upgraded, a mysterious luck effect occurred and raised his luck stat by 3 points. Now he had 9.1 in luck, making him luckier than the main character, who only had 9 points out of 10. He was surprised that the luck effect could change things like that. He was happy with the results and decided to invest the rest of his points in perseverance. He needed to endure the cube's extreme training after all. When he tried to level his endurance, a luck effect happened again. Instead of having 6.6, it turned into 7.2 points. Luck turned out to be so useful. A warning window appeared, saying there was an error that could gravely change the plot. From now on, invariable stats could not be modified with story points. The system had found the glitch Ha-jin used and fixed it quickly, but at least he had already obtained luck and perseverance. He remembered that he still had 10,000 story points left, but he decided to sleep on it for later. Moving along. To his class, the instructor was introducing himself to the students. His name was Kim Soo-yuk. He ranked 9,737 worldwide. Out of 2 million, this was very impressive. He explained that things at the cube were not as enjoyable as they might think. They would be evaluated solely based on grades. If they underperformed, they would be held back. Less than half the candidates in the cube graduated without getting held back. As this is a facility to sculpt heroes, they would be judged by exact and strict standards. He ordered them to follow him as the first part of the schedule was main. Weapon selection. They entered a room full of large and various weapons. He told them to hurry up and choose one. Once they chose, They could not change it until 6 months had passed. Suho chose a sword as his main weapon. All the main characters chose without struggle or hesitation. It was now his turn to choose a weapon of his own. He couldn't choose a heavy weapon with his current stats, and he wouldn't get much out of them even if he kept increasing his stats just to use the weapons. So he chose a weapon he was already familiar with in real life. Everyone was looking at him with surprise, saying that he might be joking. The weapon he chose was a gun. Soo-hyuk said he remembered him using a sword in the military academy. Ha-jin told him he wanted to make a change. Everyone was giving him awkward looks, calling him stupid for choosing the gun after coming to the cube. He heard all of their thoughts. Thanks to his talent, but he stood by his decision and was sure of his choice of weapon. The most used type of bullets are magic rounds. They are infused with mana, making them more destructive and powerful than normal metal bullets. But even with the power of the gun, the reason it is hated here is because of its weaknesses. We see a guy slapping a bullet, turning it into dust. The limitations of a magical gun are very clear. The second reason it is hated is because it has a short history. In this world, myths and legends come to life, and artifacts of those legends are used as weapons. The older and deeper its origin, the higher its rank. Because of this, the cadets choose old-style weapons over modern ones depending on their skills. But of course, this has nothing to do with Ha-jin. He's not a manhwa protagonist. He never even held a sword before. He can't be side by side with the cadets. So picking a gun isn't a bad choice. He can pull it immediately, and using it would make him stand out more, which will grant him more story points. Now that he has chosen his weapon, it is time to choose his talent. A talent is an ability that could be called a specialty. Most people receive only one talent, but there are a few characters who are an exception. Kim Suho has both an inactive and an active talent, the Sword Saint. We see Suho walking when he notices Chai Na-yoon. He asked if she was training here as well. She told him that of course she was. Why else would she be in a training center? He told her that now they had 2 sharpshooters in the class. She seemed angry when he mentioned Ha-jin. She couldn't accept him at all. She couldn't even call him a sharpshooter with a range of less than 1 kilometer. She said that he had probably already given up on becoming a hero, since he wouldn't have a dropout on his record if he took an early retirement. He told her she couldn't just say that he had given up. She screamed at him not to tell her what to do. Back in his room, Ha-jin was thinking to himself that Suho would become the greatest hero with his talent alone. That's how strong talents are. So he wanted to write a talent for himself, and he chose Master Sharpshooter. He could now use all types of sharpshooter weaponry, not just guns, but also bows, arrows, and anything long range. On top of that, it was an evolving talent. It was a bit weak right now, but being able to grow it in the future was an advantage. The long run was much better for him. Going to class, the instructor was explaining that they needed to understand the dungeon and tower attack example. Ha-jin was surprised that the few lines he wrote in the novel had been turned into whole lectures and textbooks in this world. But he could breeze through this class with ease. Other students would be jealous of him. Having the observation talent let him observe all students in his sight. The instructor told them to prepare for the next exam. A girl screamed, asking why she needed to memorize all of this instead of just showing her skills in the practical. Suddenly, a guy entered the room saying the whole class should head to the square in 20 minutes. The practical training was today. Ha-jin seemed bothered by this, but the others were excited. The instructor explained to them that for today's training they would be split into teams of 4. The formation would include 2 warriors, 1 sharpshooter, and 1 support. Unless special circumstances arose, the team would remain the same until the midterm test. When he finished explaining, he let them go to see the teams they were in. Ha-jin was stunned and shocked when he saw his team. He was with a person he didn't expect to be with. That person is Yu Yeonha. Like in every novel, close to the main character, there are people who interact with him throughout the story. There are many members in the main cast, and among those, Yu Yeonha is very special. She is the main inheritor of Korea's #1 guild. In the beginning of the novel, she clashes with Suho, but eventually she is influenced by him and becomes a reliable ally. So the connection to Yu Yeonha is very important. The more he gets involved in the main story, the more story points he will gain. He thought of finding a method to attract her attention. A guy and a girl approached Yeonha, saying they were in the same team. She thought for a second about whether she should reply, then welcomed them with a fake smile and asked where the last member of their team was. Ha-jin answered with a confident voice that he was the other member. He knew he shouldn't stutter or show any lack of confidence. Yeonha hates those who lack self-confidence the most. The other guy on the team recognized him as the person who chose the gun in the weapon room and said he was already famous among the first years. Suddenly, the instructor appeared and told them that he had sent the location of the monster each team would fight to their smartwatches and told them to hurry to the spot. Hajin and his team started running to the designated location, but he wasn't able to keep up with their pace. Even though his stamina was above average, they were running fast without showing much effort. The standards in the cube are very high. They arrived at a beach. The monster was a large octopus trying to destroy a ship. Yeonha suggested starting by planning the mission. They analyzed the monster and its attacks. It wasn't very strong, but the problem was the humps on its back. Once it sensed danger, it would shoot dozens of small blood-sucking squids. These could kill a human in 2 seconds once they latched on. The warriors on the team said they should focus on the baby squids, but Yeonha told them to conserve their mana and that she would handle the babies herself. They needed to kill the monster in a single attack since it could regenerate quickly. Hajin wasn't mentioned in her plan. He knew she was trying to exclude him from the fight, but he didn't. Except that the mission started by drawing the octopus's attention to bring it closer to the beach. The octopus's humps exploded, and it started chasing the warriors. Baby octopuses were falling from the sky like rain, almost latching onto the warriors. But Yeonha was quick with her whip, killing the babies with speed and precision. They were stunned by her strength. Of course, as the 7th ranked among the new cadets, she took on the task of handling the babies while the others focused on killing the octopus. It tried to attack her, but she dodged its tentacles. Then it set a trap, shooting a baby at her. She wasn't fast enough to react. Before it could latch onto her, Hajin shot it mid-air and saved her. He was trying to secure a role in interacting with the main cast. Saving Yeonha would surely include him in the main story, earning him story points. She wasn't happy about his intervention. Suddenly, the monster exploded more of its humps, launching dozens of babies at them. It was a golden moment for Hajin to shine and prove his usefulness. One of the talents he wrote is called Bullet Time. It allows him to slow the flow of time for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, he could see the baby's line of motion and shoot them mid-air. He was able to kill all of them before they even touched the ground. That move allowed the others to pin down the monster and attack. They killed it in a single slash. They completed the mission in 56 minutes, ranking in 16th place. Yeonha wasn't happy about it. She never thought she would rank that low. Even though individual performance would be valued separately, she looked at China Yoon with jealousy. Her team ranked 4th. She noticed Shin Jonghak was looking at Chai, and she got mad, then went over to her. However, she changed her expression into a more cheerful and loving one, and asked her about the practice that day. She said it was fine, and that she could see they had placed 4th. She was surprised by Yeonha getting the 16th place. She blamed it on Hajin slowing down the whole team. Yeonha was thinking the same since they took so much time to reach their destination. That set them back far, but she admitted that Hajin was performing way beyond his capabilities. He had made those moves in the battle with the babies. She couldn't believe he managed to kill all those babies before they even hit the ground. It didn't make sense that he was able to do it with just regular magic bullets. She was curious about who he really was. Hajin was in the training room, just finishing a session. He wanted to check how much he had ranked up. It seemed like luck was boosting every aspect of him. His hearing and sight were sharpened, and he had gained some story points from being involved in the fight. He was content with his progress, so he called it a day and went home. Yeonha was in her room looking at the recorded footage of the fight. She was specifically watching Hajin. She realized he shot 60 bullets in less than 3 seconds. It wasn't even possible to pull the trigger that fast. She thought he was using an automatic trigger. His skill was extraordinary, but his health was strangely very low. It was also weird that he had chosen to change his weapon so suddenly. She didn't remember seeing him in the military academy either. So many strange things were happening. Suddenly, she received a message from Shin Jonghak asking what she was up to. She got happy seeing that message. Clearly, she had a crush on Shin. She told him she was analyzing the recorded footage from today and told him he should discover some talents in his team if he planned on succeeding the guild in the future. He joked about her whole team being trash, but was curious about the gunman, referring to Hajin. She said that he could manage somewhere in the 900s rank. He wasn't convinced and said he had just gotten lucky today. Inside the guild building, the vice captain was watching the highlights from yesterday's practice. They were impressed by Suho and his fluid movements and strong sword slashes. Then came the video of Hajin firing 60 bullets, 59 of which hit their targets in 3 seconds. They were stunned and surprised. He was popular for changing his weapon to a gun as soon as he entered the cube. They even gave him the title of the Unorthodox. The vice captain was quick to say it must be because of enlightenment. Before enlightenment, you can't possibly know what talent and gift you could have. Many people change their main weapon. After it happens because their previous one doesn't match their profession. But for most, this slows their progress a lot. It's impressive to reach enlightenment at 17, but it's not that attractive since he's only tied to guns. She suggested, They keep him in mind. If he really has potential, he will shine no matter what. The next day, students were practicing anti-personnel combat. They were going one-armed against one unarmed, but they were using training equipment, so the results were easy to assess, and there would be fewer injuries. Hajin was the only one fighting, a constructor since they didn't have training guns yet, and using a real gun would result in harming other students. He was doing poorly against her. She told him to get his act together. She tried to punch him, but he dodged it quickly. That caught her attention. His abilities were lower than average, and his moves were very amateur-like, but he could dodge so smoothly. She started swinging punches at him, and he was able to dodge all of them, thanks to his ability to predict the target's movements. He could clearly see where she was going to strike next, but he had to do the dodging. Other students were laughing at him. He drew quite a bit of attention to himself, and that alone earned him 40 story points. When the practice ended, he went to get something to drink. Yona passed by him, giving him a disgusted look. He threw a Coke at her as an experiment to see how many story points he could get by slightly interacting with the protagonist. She said that if he wanted to start a fight, he could. He told her that she helped, and that this was just a token of a new friendship. She threw it back at him, saying he didn't need to thank her, and that he shouldn't talk to her so casually without her permission. She left, but noticed he had slipped one into her bag. She didn't throw it out and hid it to drink later. He knew she loved fast food, but she couldn't buy it because of her reputation. The experiment failed, and he didn't receive any story points. He realized he had to intervene with the main story. The next main story was the National Weapons Museum's demonic human ambush. Demonic humans are people who made deals with the devil, gaining immense power in exchange for their souls. This incident would be caused by a demonic human hiding in the museum to assassinate someone, but he would be defeated by the protagonists who happened to be there. With this, Kim Soo-ho would win the attention of many other main characters. The Iyuts main cast for this episode would be Chae, Soo-ho, and the demonic human. But the demonic human wouldn't be a major threat since it was still the beginning of the story. Hajin could intervene in this episode, but he had to find a way to join the museum. He was interrupted by a worker telling him it was closing time and that he should get going. As he was about to leave, his laptop flashed and a message popped up. Hajin was trying to sign up for a club. A club in the cube is an extra activity at the academy, somewhat like a gathering where cadets organize activities with each other. The club he was trying to join was the traveling club. The president of the club was explaining how it worked. They would use the teleporter twice a month to travel outside of the cube. Many of the main cast members were in this club, including Hajin. Their next trip would be to Seoul. His plan was to go there with the main cast and slightly intervene with the story. They picked their groups randomly, and once again, Yona and Hajin ended up on the same team. She was still a bit mad at him and told him to go his separate way. They reached the museum, where various weapons were displayed in front of them. Hajin noticed Soo-ho was looking at some swords, so he went over to say hi. He introduced himself, and they were going to chat for longer, but they were interrupted by a monster attack. The gates closed and people started panicking. Chae told everyone not to worry and instructed every hero to pick up a weapon and prepare for the attack. Then, the demonic human walked in. Hajin recognized him. He was a stepping stone for the main characters to grow much in the story. The demon tried to attack people, but Soo-ho tried to stop him. Hajin knew the demon would be easily defeated by Soo-ho, but to his surprise, Soo-ho was sent straight into the wall by one strike from the demon. This wasn't as written in the story. Something strange was happening. The story he wrote wasn't going like this. At the start, they should have been pushed back, and Soo-ho would have revealed his true powers to defeat the demon. But now, Kim Soo-ho was lying on the ground from that strike. He needed time to recover. The demon stepped closer. Chae tried to stop him and shot arrows at him, but they didn't even faze him. He didn't react to the arrows at all. He was advancing against her with sheer force. He lashed out at her, but Soo-ho stopped him. So, the demon shifted his aggression to Soo-ho, nearly killing him if not for an arrow from Chae. He pinned her to the wall with his magical grip. The situation had gotten so bad that someone might actually die. Hajin was confused. This wasn't the story he had written anymore. The outcome was different for some reason. He tried to calm down and recollect his thoughts. He pulled bullets out of his inventory, but they wouldn't even scratch the demon. So he quickly pulled up his laptop and condensed the mana inside them, making their destructive power a 6 out of 10 by using a story point. He was sure the demon had dark mana. The most harmful thing to dark demons was light, so he aimed at him and shot a light bullet. The bullet was condensed with light essence and would explode inside his body. The bullet hit the demon and exploded in his arm, but it drained all of Hajin's stamina to shoot it, giving Soo-ho time to cut the demon with his sword Saint Magic. The demon was finally defeated. Everyone was exhausted from the fight. Suho tried to help Che up, but she slapped his hand angrily, upset about something. Hajin told him to leave her alone. Her brother would probably come and help her soon, just as he knew it would happen in the story he had written. Both of them looked at him with disbelief, as if he had said something outrageous. A woman swordsman had finished fighting the other monsters outside the building. She was then informed about the situation inside the museum and that the demon had already been dealt with. But she hurried inside once she heard that Che and Suho were the ones responsible for that. She wanted to meet Suho in person. She met Hajin on her way, and he told her Suho was inside the building. She found it odd that he knew she was looking for Suho. He went to sit on a bench to recollect his thoughts and progress. Things had progressed as planned without any issues, but his importance to the story was still insignificant. He remembered that this world was a remake version of the story he wrote. It had a co-author modifying the story, so things might be slightly different than he expected. His predictions were now completely useless. He opened his laptop and found a message that had been sent to him earlier. A video called One Flaw played. It talked about how the flow of the story would change. The protagonist was always there to save the day, but the readers would soon get bored of such repetition. Therefore, the level and difficulty of the enemies in the story would increase from now on, even if it resulted in utter chaos. The instructor called out for Suho and Hajin and told them he would ask about what happened later, but for now, they could return. Che left with her family to the hospital. They stood there for a moment, and Suho asked Hajin why he had said something about Che's brother. Hajin didn't know what he was talking about, and Suho seemed annoyed by it. He said they would talk about it later. Later, Hajin tried to look up Chai Na-yoon's report on his laptop. It seemed the same as he had written it before, but there was one major change. Her brother, Che Jin-yoon, was left in critical condition after an accident with a demi-human. A message popped up on his laptop saying the story had been modified. The main character had too many assistants, like her brother, so the setting had been changed. 4 years ago, right after Jin-yoon was appointed as a hero and on his first mission, he received a demon's brand and became a demon seed. We go back to Na-yoon, sitting on a hospital bed, listening to the news. Her father came in a hurry, worried about her. She told him she was fine and asked if she could visit her brother, who was in a coma, before she left the hospital. Hajin was still thinking about her brother holding a demon brand. Demons are a higher entity that can brand humans and turn them into demon seeds. Humans who have turned into seeds enter an incubation period where they rest and eventually blossom into strong demons. In Hajin's original setting, the incubation period lasts for about 5 to 6 years, so more than half of the time had already passed. Now, there was only one solution: to quickly and decisively kill him before the demon inside him awakens. But who could do it? There was no assassin crazy enough to kill a 4th-generation member of a rich family, and there were no clear indicators of a seed, so he couldn't suggest taking action. It was impossible for Kim Suho to kill a fully bloomed demon. Even with the help of other professional heroes, many of them would be sacrificed fighting him. In the end, Kim Hajin had to kill him himself. Na-yoon was seen inside the room with her brother, talking to him about what happened that day and how she almost died during the fight. The nurses told her that visiting hours were over, and she said goodbye to him. She stood in front of the door, thinking about what Hajin had said. She never liked Hajin, but now she was holding a grudge. At the Hero's Tower, inside the files room, we see the woman who ran into Hajin earlier, the Deputy Guild Master. She was looking into the files of the fight that happened in the museum. Her assistant was telling her to stop since it was pretty illegal to look into the files without a permit, but she couldn't pass up the golden opportunity to find information. In the body of the demi-human, they had found traces of light attribute mana. This meant that someone could use that attribute. Light attribute users were powerful against dark attribute creatures, which most demi-humans were. She planned to find out who it was and recruit them. Since it was defeated by 3 cadets who happened to be there, one of them must have that attribute. Kim Suho and Chai Na-yoon were already being watched, but the third person, Kim Hajin, hadn't been heard of. Kim Hajin was sitting on the stadium stairs going through his laptop. He realized something new. People couldn't actually see the laptop, so he could browse the settings freely without drawing much attention. He added another function to the laptop. He would now get a notification if a setting differed from the one he originally wrote in his novel. Suddenly, Na-yoon appeared behind him, challenging him to a spar. He refused, saying that his bullets were real, and he'd get into trouble if he injured her. She got so mad at his smug talking, but their conversation was interrupted by the constructor, so she left the scene. Hajin didn't want to apologize to her yet, as making up with her wouldn't benefit him. After he had to kill her brother later on in the story, she would feel even more betrayed. At a gathering, we see someone talking. Yoon Hyun, the president of the Truth Club. He welcomed everyone and explained the club's activities. The club's purpose was to gather and analyze monsters, their pros and weaknesses. The crowd seemed to be attracted to Yoon because of his demon abilities. Hajin knew that Yoon would be the villain and the leading cause of the cadet kidnappings and monster invasions later in the story. He was a demi-human who had obtained the charm ability from the demon Lilith. Yoon's target was Yonha. He showed a hologram of a monster tiger that had lived since the beginning of the towers and dungeons, with a 50-year history. The information regarding monsters was extremely valuable, worth millions of dollars. He suddenly asked Yonha what her thoughts were on the weaknesses of this monster. She said that its weaknesses were still unknown, and he replied that discussing such matters was the joy of the club. If anyone wanted to share their opinion, they could participate in the after-party. Hajin asked if she was going to the after-party. She said she would, as she might get useful information. He asked if she was going to share this info with her. Guild's raid team. Her family was one of the major guilds influencing Korea since the breaking of the towers and dungeons. She told him to get to the point. He said he would tell her the weak point of the tiger monster, the small emblem on its heel. If they hit it, they could stop the tiger's movement. However, Hajin didn't give her the information for free and told her to buy the Desert Eagle gun from her guild. She asked what the basis for his claim was, and he told her that he had nothing, but she would waste her time if she didn't listen to him. He thought to himself that if Yeonha decided to ignore him, this information worth millions would go to waste. But if she believed him, he would end up with a powerful ally, and that ally in the future would be called the Queen of Seoul. We see Yeonha talking to her guild on the smartwatch, telling them that during the fight, the blue emblem on its heel might be its weak point. Hajin was in his room, shocked to find out that the original owner of this body had taken out a loan of $300,000. To make matters worse, there was nothing left in the bank account, and he might have to spend the rest of his life gathering money to pay off the debt. He calmed down and thought about two legal ways he could earn money. The first was through stocks. Guilds that raid and conquer towers and dungeons were treated like companies, and those guilds listed on the stock market had their stocks traded. While Hajin knew which guilds would be listed, he didn't have enough money to invest in them. The second method was field hunting. A field was a dangerous area filled with monsters, and by selling monster parts, he could earn quick money. But he barely passed the average stats for a male and wasn't sure if he could survive hunting monsters. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was a package sent to him by Yeonha. He opened it and was surprised by what he found inside. We later see Hajin traveling through a portal to a place called Gangwon, where a field area awaited him. He arrived at what looked like a local market where everyone gathered to sell monster body parts and other goods. He thought it might be a good idea to find an agency to help him sell stuff here. He was then approached by a man who asked if he was a monster hunter. The man handed him his business card, and Hajin was stunned when he read the name, SH Agent, Park Soo-hyuk. Not only was he the director of Korea's best agency, but he also became the representative agent for Kim Soo-ho. Hajin didn't believe he would run into him this early in the story. Soo-hyuk was a bit clumsy and unconfident, as it was the beginning of the story, and many great people hadn't found their true worth yet. Despite his doubts, Hajin signed a contract with him. He wondered if it was fine to intercept Kim Soo-ho's agent, but quickly brushed off the thought. Later, we see Hajin walking to the hunting area, while Soo-hyuk couldn't keep up with him. Hajin wanted to make an impact with Soo-ho. Unlike other agents who waited outside until everything was done, they came across footprints of hobgoblins, which were worth between $300 to $400. Hajin wasn't convinced, since one magic bullet cost around $200. He then pointed at a steel boar. Soo-hyuk warned him that he wouldn't even be able to pierce its skin with a gun, and that it would only anger the creature. Hajin told him his gun was quite powerful. It was the Desert Eagle that Yeonha had given him earlier in exchange for the information about the tiger monster's weak point. Using story points, he had enhanced the gun, adding a feature where its power amplified each time he killed an enemy with a single blow. He shot the boar, and the bullet pierced its body with ease, killing it. Soo-hyuk was astonished by the Desert Eagle and Hajin's skills. Hajin even randomly shot a monster bird from very far away with the help of his enhanced sight. They went to check on the corpses, but they were too heavy to carry all the way back to the market. Soo-hyuk told him he would call someone to bring the bodies back and reward Hajin as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Hajin was looking for guilds to invest his money in. He knew that the Packhorse Master Guild would rise in value by 1,000% later in the story, so he bought their stock. He was thinking about his next move when he suddenly remembered a shady team that would appear later in the story. Their actions and identities were concealed, and Hajin was probably the only one who knew who they were. Despite being villains in the story, they hated demonic humans. Hajin thought he might be able to make a deal with their leader and kill Nayun's brother before it was too late. When he tried to look for something on his laptop, it turned off completely. He panicked because the laptop was the most useful thing he had, and probably his only way home. But it turned back on, with a message saying that 1 month had passed and an update for the laptop features was now available. In a cafe, Yeonha sat with the second-ranked student at school, waiting for important people to arrive and meet them. He wasn't happy waiting, and their conversation was half-hearted, with him giving one-word answers. Out of nowhere, Chai Na-yoon entered the cafe, and the second-ranked student got excited and rushed to greet her, leaving Yeonha ignored. Yeonha was visibly upset. Then, Chae asked if they knew a person named Kim Ha-jin. She explained the incident that happened at the museum and how he helped them defeat the demonic human, even shooting off its arm. She found it suspicious and asked Yeonha for her thoughts, since they were on the same team. But Yeonha knew very little about him. Apart from his background as an orphan and his massive debt, they had no useful information about him. Ha-jin had refused to tell them how he knew the weak point of the tiger monster. Chae suggested that he might be a demonic human, but Yeonha dismissed the idea, saying that he couldn't be one, especially since he had killed one of his own kind. Back in Ha-jin's room, the update on his laptop had finally finished. Suddenly, his arm flashed in pain, and a strong dizziness and headache struck him. A flood of information began pouring into his brain. It was so overwhelming that he couldn't take it anymore and passed out. Meanwhile, the others at the cafe continued, talking about him, with Chae admitting that she disliked Ha-jin. Soon after the museum incident, Ha-jin, Chai Na-yoon, and Kim Soo-ho were awarded for their heroic actions. Ha-jin's arm was still aching from the events the previous day. He couldn't understand what had caused the pain, but he knew it was tied to something deeper. As usual, Na-yoon was teasing Ha-jin, and Soo-ho intervened, asking her to switch seats with him. Soo-ho then thanked Ha-jin for saving him during the museum incident. He acknowledged that without Ha-jin, he would have likely died. Ha-jin downplayed it, stating that he would have probably won if he had just left him alone. He knew that protagonists always grew stronger after facing a life-threatening danger. Just then, a person who seemed very important appeared. Yoo Si-hyuk, ranked 37th in the rankings. He would be personally awarding them. He called out to Soo-ho and Chae, complimenting them for their actions. But when he turned to Ha-jin, he didn't even recognize him. This lack of recognition stung Ha-jin's pride, leaving him feeling invisible. Later, Ha-jin sat on a bench, enjoying the dessert he bought with his award money. He was thinking of using the remaining money to buy stocks, but decided to check the new features his laptop had received from the update. First, he checked the stigma, which had caused the pain yesterday and left a mark on his wrist. It seemed to work as a wish for him, but Ha-jin didn't fully understand how it functioned. Then, there was the internet access. His laptop now offered multiple websites he could access, some of which required story points to enter. Among these sites was something called the Violet Society, a famous private platform where information and weapons were traded. There were bounties and requests posted there, and every hero had interacted with it at least once. The government chose to leave it alone due to its power. Ha-jin could access the Violet Society for 250 story points, and he had more than enough after the rumors about him spread in the cafe. Before he could sign up, he was interrupted by Yoon Seung-ga, the vice captain of the class. She greeted him and offered him her business card. Ha-jin knew there was significance in her offering him the card. She told him that she was curious about something and asked if she could ask him a question. Ha-jin realized this was the beginning of her scouting process. Ha-jin was considering his options. Yoon Seung-ga seemed nicer than most, but her real personality was much colder. She was a firm believer in survival of the fittest and wouldn't hesitate to discard anyone she found useless. If Ha-jin made a connection with her now, it might prove beneficial later in the story. But for now, he refused to answer her questions, telling her that he wasn't going to share anything. She had probably come to him after hearing about his use of a light attribute attack. But her curiosity was more dangerous than it appeared. He had to reject her now to avoid it turning into something more dangerous later. Ha-jin then checked his laptop again. The stigma could now create anything he wished for using mana. He tested this by thinking about a dagger, and instantly, a dagger formed out of mana in his hand. The next ability was the Book of Truth. It could answer any question in exchange for 1 story point. Before he could explore further, his smartwatch suddenly flashed with an emergency notice. A person was missing, and Ha-jin immediately recognized this as the start of the second arc in the story, the Cube serial murder incident. During this arc, 6 cadets would go missing over the course of a month. The case would become more complicated, as the number of victims grew and the murderers remained undetected. This arc was crucial, as the final target would be Yeonha. Ha-jin knew that he couldn't intervene too much without disrupting the original story, but he also couldn't ignore what was happening. At school, Suho was minding his own business when the class president pointed out that Ha-jin was being bullied by some classmates. Suho wanted to intervene, but the president told him to wait and see how Ha-jin would handle it. The president seemed to believe that someone who could shoot off a demonic human's arm wouldn't tolerate being humiliated. Suho didn't buy into that and moved to help Ha-jin. But before anything could happen, the instructor arrived and pinned up the grade reports on the wall. Ha-jin looked at the list and was surprised to see that he was ranked first in the school. It wasn't a huge shock since he had cheated using his laptop, but one girl in particular, Elizabeth, was visibly stunned. She had been the top student for years, and Ha-jin's sudden rise might have a significant impact later. Back in class, Elizabeth was still in disbelief over Ha-jin's grade. The professor praised Ha-jin's work, calling it extraordinary. Elizabeth, upset by the results, decided to make Ha-jin her rival. In his room, Ha-jin was considering ways to make money using the Book of Truth, perhaps by answering questions online for a set price. With everything seemingly calm, he could now invest the story points he had been collecting. The cube no longer seemed like the safest place with all the attacks and murders happening, so he decided to improve his weapons and abilities. He turned his Desert Eagle into a sniper rifle, and it transformed instantly. He also began working on improving his physical abilities by creating an art for parkour, which enhanced his body movement and flexibility. He didn't feel the effects immediately, but he knew it would help later. Soon, a notification appeared on his laptop asking about the whereabouts of another missing cadet. Ha-jin knew that everyone who had gone missing had been kidnapped and murdered, but he also knew that the kidnappers were already active, and it wasn't right for him to remain silent while he knew who they were. Back at the cube, the students were preparing for another practical training. The instructor explained that they would experience a dungeon raid through an artificial dungeon. 2 teams from each class would combine to create a larger team, and the dungeon would be filled with traps and mysteries, so they had to remain cautious. As Ha-jin was thinking about how he would survive this new training, 2 notification windows popped up on his screen. The settings had changed. Nayun's characteristics were now more bad-tempered, Jaden's potential growth had increased slightly, and Sven's mental state had worsened, increasing the chances of him being encroached upon by a demon pawn. The story was about to get much more chaotic. Ha-jin took a moment to reflect on 2 individuals who could pose serious problems down the line. The first was Jaden, a narcissistic cadet who thrived in front of the weak, but crumbled when confronted by stronger opponents. His growth potential had increased, which meant he was likely to become a more dangerous figure as time went on. Ha-jin couldn't let his narcissistic attitude cause problems in the future. The second person was Sven, a government-funded student from Germany. Sven had dreamt of entering the cube and reaching the top, but as the story progressed, his aspirations would be crushed by the main characters. This rejection would destabilize him mentally, and he would eventually make a contract with a demon, selling his soul in exchange for power. The problem was that Sven was also in love with Chai Na-yoon, and with the likelihood of him becoming a demonic human increasing, Ha-jin couldn't afford to let anything happen to Na-yoon. If she were to die at this point in the story, it would drastically alter the narrative, making Ha-jin unable to predict future events. While Ha-jin was mulling over these thoughts, he was approached by another teammate who joked with him. Ha-jin, still harboring a bad reputation among the students due to rumors of blackmail and using his cadet status to wield power, told the person to screw off. Soon, they entered the dungeon and were faced with a crossroads. The group debated which way to go, but Ha-jin suggested they take the 6th doorway. His teammates didn't want to listen, but Yeonha, ever the pragmatist, decided to trust his judgment, believing he had a keen eye. Ha-jin had chosen this path because it was the one Chai Na-yoon had taken earlier. He couldn't let anything happen to her, especially if Sven turned into a demonic human. If something went wrong with her now, it would change the course of the story in ways Ha-jin couldn't control. As they continued walking, Ha-jin warned them about a salamander monster lurking nearby. The group shot a light arrow to illuminate the area, confirming the presence of the creature. It attacked quickly, and the team readied themselves for a fight. Yeonha asked if anyone could use a water attribute attack. Ha-jin could, but he didn't think it was the right time to reveal his abilities. Instead, Yeonha managed to hold the monster's mouth open while the team attacked and killed it. But just as they thought they were safe, a poisonous arrow was shot at Yeonha. Ha-jin quickly pulled her out of the way, saving her from being struck. He suspected that this attack came from a demonic human. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, Sven's team was struggling. Sven had been hit by the same poisoned arrow and was in bad shape. Nayun lifted him, trying to save him from a massive monster that attacked their group. Nayun bravely held a shield, blocking fire attacks from the monster while the archer on their team fired arrows from the back. The battle continued as they worked together to clear the area, but Hajin couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why would a poisonous arrow be in a training dungeon? His suspicions grew stronger. Suddenly, the salamander reappeared, charging at them with a fire attack. They had no time to think of a strategy. In a split second, Hajin used the stigma on his wrist, forming a magical wall of water that protected the team from the salamander's fiery onslaught. The water barrier knocked the monster out, and the team was left in awe of his power. They asked why he hadn't used it earlier, but Hajin downplayed it, claiming it was magic from his armament. The others didn't fully buy his explanation, but they let it go as they had more pressing matters to focus on. With the monster defeated, Hajin warned that it might not have been the only one in the area. The place was well suited for salamanders, so another one could easily appear. They pressed on, moving as quickly as possible. But Yeonha, who had been paying close attention to Hajin, began to grow suspicious of him. He seemed to always know exactly what to do and when to act, whether it was about the tiger monster, the light attribute, or now this. She wondered if Hajin might be a demonic human. Back with Chae Na-yoon's team, they were still struggling with a lava monster. Sven's condition was deteriorating due to the poison, and his morale had taken a heavy blow. He felt useless, like he was only slowing the team down. Just as he was about to give up, a deep voice echoed in his mind, asking if he wanted to be stronger. The voice offered him power in exchange for something cheap, his soul. Desperate, Sven reached out and made the deal with the demon. Instantly, he screamed in agony as the demon's power flooded into him. His team, helpless, tried to help, but a massive lava monster attacked them just as Sven lost control. The group tried to run for safety, but the monster destroyed every path they attempted to take. Nayun fell to the ground, and the monster moved in to attack her. It seemed like her final moments had arrived. Just as the lava was about to engulf her, a bullet rang out from a mile away, striking the monster and stunning it. It was Hajin, using his Desert Eagle gun to shoot the monster and save her. However, minutes before Hajin could reach the team, he and his group faced a dead end. The entrance to the next area wasn't there, and Hajin realized it was an addition by the co-author to the original story. They tried to break through the wall, but it was too tough to even scratch. Hajin, using his parkour ability, found a small crack in the wall and quickly climbed through with the help of his new skill. But as he did so, the monster regained its senses. Hajin shouted at Nayun to wake up and start fighting back. Nayun, still spaced out, finally got to her feet. The team attacked, but the monster didn't budge. Nayun called for them to buy time while she charged up her attack. With Sven now fully under the demon's influence, he joined the fight, and together, they managed to subdue the monster. Nayun charged her attack and finally killed the lava monster, ending the battle. But the fight had just begun. Sven's transformation into a demonic human had only just begun, and the consequences of his decision would ripple through the story in unpredictable ways. The group had successfully defeated the magma monster, and as they took a moment to catch their breath, Hajin's gaze was fixed on Sven. Although Sven hadn't fully turned into a demonic human yet, his power had clearly increased, and Hajin knew it was only a matter of time. His contract with the demon had already set things in motion, and now it was a waiting game to see when Sven would bloom into a full Jin. Hajin wasn't sure when that would happen, but the more dangerous part was that he couldn't predict when Sven would snap. That uncertainty was what concerned him most. Nayun approached Hajin as he rested on a rock. She thanked him for saving her earlier, which caught Hajin completely off guard. Of all people, Nayun had thanked him. He was struck by how rare that was. Nayun had lived a tragic life. Her mother was killed by a djinn when Nayun was just 6 years old, leading her to dedicate her life to becoming a hero. While other children her age had fun, she'd spent her childhood training and honing her skills. That intense focus on strength had come at the cost of forming meaningful relationships. She didn't trust emotions, seeing them as a weakness, and as a result, she had very few true friends. She asked Hajin why he allowed Jonghak to bully him if he was as strong as everyone said. She believed Hajin could easily beat Jonghak in one shot. Hajin responded cryptically, telling her that he had his own personal weapon. Even so, Nayun persisted, thinking that Hajin's talent must be what enhanced the gun he used. Hajin brushed her off, not wanting to engage further. Before she left, Nayun asked if he had anything else to say. Hajin hesitated, but then admitted that he knew she wanted an apology for what he had said about her brother in the past. He acknowledged that if he apologized, she would likely forgive him, but he thought it would be better to leave their relationship awkward as it was. The reason was simple. He knew that, in the end, he would have to kill her brother. The thought of that future event made him uncomfortable, and he didn't want to complicate things now. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the artificial dungeon, announcing that everyone had to evacuate due to the appearance of real monsters and malfunctioning cameras. The situation had gotten out of control, but fortunately, no one had died. The cube quickly investigated the cadets, and the case was closed swiftly. The djinn responsible for the events had covered his tracks. However, Hajin still had bigger concerns. The side effects of Sven's contract with the demon were already beginning to show. His emotions had become volatile, and his obsession with Nayun was growing stronger. It was dangerous, especially because Sven might attack Nayun if his emotions spiraled out of control. Hajin needed to keep a close eye on both Sven and Nayun to prevent a disaster. Thanks to his laptop's new internet access, Hajin could now monitor their private communications. He discovered that Sven had messaged Nayun, proposing a bet at the hunting club that week. It was the day he'd originally planned to go into a rampage in Hajin's novel. Hajin knew he had to act fast to prevent Sven's breakdown. Meanwhile, Suho had also messaged him, asking if Hajin was free this Friday to help with a favor. Hajin's strength had grown considerably, and he felt ready to venture into MT. Gari, a famous place in Gangwon where the essence of nature and spiritual energy clashed. The mountains were known for their hidden treasures, and Hajin had decided to tag along with a professional wanderer who could guide him through the difficult terrain. As they trekked through the mountains, Hajin stumbled upon a wild ginseng. Without thinking, he ate it, knowing it would boost all of his stats by 2 points. Although he realized he could have sold it for a hefty sum, the boost to his strength was more valuable for the moment. After some time, they reached the cave he was looking for, the undead dungeon. The boss inside was a high-level difficulty, 1 monster, and although Hajin had grown stronger, he knew he wasn't ready to take on that monster. He wasn't there for the boss, though. His real goal was a hidden stage inside the dungeon. As Hajin ventured deeper into the dungeon, hordes of undead corpses and skeletons rose from the ground to attack him. He quickly drew his gun and used his abilities to mow them down. Pressing on, he finally reached the base of the Witch Evangel, a hidden boss inside the dungeon. Hajin knew that in the future she would construct the worst undead raid in history, and she would only become more difficult to defeat as she matured. He had to strike now, before she reached her adult form. Despite the hesitation he felt at the sight of the child witch, Hajin's resolve hardened. He formed a spear from light attribute magic using his stigma, and with one swift strike, he pierced her body, killing her instantly. Upon her death, the witch dropped 2 valuable items, the ether and the evangel seed. The ether bonded with Hajin, enhancing his stats and increasing his strength significantly. He was now on par with the cadets, and he received 40 story points as a reward for defeating the witch. He was also considering selling the wild ginseng for a large sum of money, but the real gain was the evangel seed. If he took care of the seed and fed it blood, it would grow into a powerful witch and a valuable ally. The problem was that the witch's growth and strength depended on whose blood he fed her. Hajin wasn't sure how he could get strong enough blood without scaring people away, so he decided to think about it later. That night, he went to bed early to prepare for the difficult events to come. The next day, the president of the hunting club explained that the group would be hunting wildlife in the forest. They would help the public while gaining experience. But Hajin wasn't sure exactly how things would unfold. He only knew that Sven would go into a rampage during this event, and that it would hurt Nayun badly. Hajin was particularly concerned, because the settings had changed. Sven hadn't yet gone into a rampage, but he was clearly using demon-like powers. Nayun noticed Hajin watching her closely, and Sven, feeling possessive and jealous, took her away to compete against her in a hunting bet. The stakes were high. Whoever hunted more animals would win, and the loser had to grant a wish. Sven killed a large number of deer, stacking them on top of each other, while Nayun came back with just 1 deer. When Sven made his wish, he asked Nayun to go out with him. She refused, telling him that she only knew him for a week and that she would prefer someone stronger than her. In a fit of jealousy, Sven's emotions spiraled, and he turned into a full djinn. He attacked Nayun, demanding that if he became stronger, would she go out with him? Hajin was quick to react, using his ether shield to block Sven's attack. However, Sven was too fast, and he grabbed Hajin, pinning him down. Nayun, in the meantime, managed to hold her broken bow, which transformed into a magic sword as her mana overflowed. With the weapon in hand, Nayun finally attacked Sven, ready to defend herself and stop the rampage. The situation had escalated, and it was clear that the battle between Sven and Nayun was far from over. How things would resolve remained uncertain, but Hajin knew that this event could change everything. The attack had completely drained Nayun's energy, and the sword she had manifested disappeared in an instant. Though she tried to insist she was fine, Nayun fainted, her body collapsing from mana exhaustion. Hajin, without a second thought, lifted her onto his back and began walking. She woke up shortly afterward, demanding that he put her down, but as soon as she tried to stand, it became clear she couldn't even keep herself upright. Her mana was completely depleted, and it would take her at least 2 days to fully recover. Hajin didn't argue. He simply carried her again, quietly asking if she planned to stick with her bow and arrow. Nayun seemed unwilling to admit the power of the sword she had wielded earlier. Hajin could already see the future. Nayun would eventually become a formidable swordmaster, cutting down hundreds of monsters and jinn with a single slash. He didn't push her on it, but he knew she had untapped potential. Eventually, Hajin took her to a portal, and they returned home together. The next day at school, the talk of the cadets was all about the jinn attack on Nayun. Hajin walked into a room full of the main characters, where an intense conversation was already taking place. Before the hunting trip, Suho had asked Hajin for a favor. There had been a string of kidnappings recently, and the Cube had assigned a group of cadets to investigate the crimes. Suho had specifically asked Hajin to help with the investigation because of his reputation for having a keen eye. Nayun had suggested that they pick Hajin, believing he could be of great use. As the group discussed the situation, Suho expressed his concerns. He didn't believe the jinn that attacked Nayun was connected to the recent kidnappings, but he feared that Nayun might be the next target. Jinns followed the orders of their demon masters, and since Sven had contracted with a demon, other jinns contracted with the same demon could be after Nayun. Suho wanted to know if anyone had noticed anything suspicious lately. Hajin, who already knew the culprits from the original story, was hesitant. In the novel, he had kept their identities a secret and allowed the story to unfold naturally. But things had changed. There were more victims now than in the original timeline, and Hajin wasn't about to sit back and let things spiral out of control. He didn't want to use the original story as an excuse to let bad things happen. He spoke up, suggesting that Yoon Haeyeon, the president of the academic club, was acting suspicious. The group immediately shot down the idea, telling him that they had already investigated Yoon since he had been close to the first victim. Hajin wasn't deterred, proposing that maybe the victims had been drawn to Yoon on their own. They quickly dismissed this idea, claiming that Yoon couldn't hypnotize people with just simple tricks. Before Hajin could explain further, Yeonha interrupted, suggesting that the likelihood of Yoon being the jinn was less than the chance of Hajin himself being one. Hajin was taken aback, and the room went tense. Suho tried to defend him, pointing out that Hajin had used the portal during the time of the crime, which would make it impossible for him to be the jinn responsible. But Yeonha wasn't convinced. The situation grew heated. One of the cadets, angry at Hajin's suggestions, tried to get physical. Hajin didn't hesitate, threatening the cadet to keep his distance. The tension escalated, and soon Suho had to intervene, calming everyone down. Hajin, feeling the weight of the situation, decided it was best to leave before things got even worse. He walked out of the room, frustration boiling inside him. Outside, Yona was talking to Nayun through her smartwatch, assuring her that Hajin could never be a jinn. The conversation did little to ease Hajin's growing discomfort. As he left the building, Hajin couldn't help but feel angry and conflicted. He had created these characters with such love and passion, and now, here they were, accusing him. His frustration turned inward. He felt disconnected from this world. He missed his original world, his family, and his friends. What if they were looking for him? What if they missed him? He wondered if he could ever return home, and a small window popped up in his vision, notifying him that his tenacity stat had increased. Hajin found it almost laughable that such a notification would appear at such a time. But in that moment, it helped him calm down, and he realized how determined he was to find a way back to his old life. Meanwhile, back in the room, the conversation continued. Yeonha seemed more suspicious of Hajin, particularly after he had dodged that attack earlier. Her suspicions grew, and she received a message from Yoon Haeyeon asking if they could meet at the study room before the club meeting. She agreed. Yoon Haeyeon sat in the study room, his face smeared with blood, his smile cold and twisted. His plan was progressing smoothly. The pieces were falling into place. With each move, he could feel the power growing within him, and soon, his manipulation of the cadets would reach its peak. He was ready to take the next step in his sinister plot.